Kwasi Kwateng, the man with the prodigious package who was so much admired by Liz Truss, or that was so much admired by Liz Truss, is back in the news and trying to defend his reputation and pointing out that should the Conservatives lose at the general election and lose badly, woof, then Rishi Sunak should be very much responsible. He should be held responsible if the Tories suffer a massive defeat on July the 4th. Well, of course they will. They've already suffered that massive defeat. And the statement by Kwasi Kwateng needs to be put in the context of the suggestion that Liz Truss should be to blame for the defeat of the Conservatives, and Kwasi Kwateng is, of course, trying to shift the blame from himself to somebody else. He has huge responsibility for the failure of the Conservative Party. It's Kwasi Kwateng's prodigious package and the absurd Liz Truss experiment, which has caused people's mortgages around the country to double, certainly to rise, and the anxiety over that month of nonsense when Liz Truss stood in for common sense and waved her arms around, despite having lessons in gesturing and public performance. She still looked as if she was inadequate and couldn't actually control her hands. I don't care how many hand jobs she performed in the morning and in the evening to try and master this manipulation. She failed, and that was just the beginning of her failures. This is an individual who couldn't pack a box, let alone an idea, and she's still chattering around in Tufton Street, and she still believes that she should be given another chance and that she could have some positive effect. She can have no positive effect except to be placed in the House of Lords and be held ultimately responsible for the mess that she created. The mess she created is not simply something that will seriously damage, possibly even wipe out the Conservative Party. The mess she created is something that has seriously damaged our country. And rather than preening and popping around, smiling and looking for approval and flapping her hands around like somebody out of a Marionation television series on ITV, Jerry Anderson, she should accept responsibility with humility, as should Kwasi Kwateng with humility, but neither of them have that humility. Kwasi Kwateng at least has the advantage of being one of the greatest minds in the Conservative Party and one of the most beautiful writers in the Conservative Party, but nevertheless, he's an arrogant sod, and he should know his place. His place is the mechanism through which Liz Truss did so much damage. And beyond that, I have no problems with Kwasi Kwateng, except until he takes proper responsibility, I will ridicule him shamelessly and endlessly. When I left office, I was just checking actually the polls just now. Reform were on about 4%. I think when Liz Truss left in October 2022, they're on 5%. If you suffer a massive defeat, clearly the leader is very much responsible for that. What proportion? I don't know. Obviously, there were other mistakes done by other leaders. He called the time of the election. I don't think he had very much choice, Mr. Kwateng. I think he was pushed into calling an election at some point, and the situation wasn't going to improve. The fact that he's tried to take personal responsibility is not great. The fact that he is supported by a chumocracy in number 10 that is riddled with corruption and stupidity is not great. The fact that the moment he called an election, so many of his MPs decided they weren't going to stand is not great. It's not a great look all round. But the rot starts in earnest with Kwasi Kwateng and Liz Truss, and the rot was anticipated, I think, earlier with Boris Johnson, with Theresa May. I think it goes back to David Cameron, frankly. But the people who I consider particularly responsible for destroying the Conservative Party and destroying politics in Britain and destroying our country would start with Theresa May. And Liz Truss was certainly a major negative influence on the trajectory towards doom. He says, if there is a defeat, blame will be apportioned to lots of different people. Yes, well, Kwasi Kwateng, you should get your shoulders ready to accept quite a significant proportion of that. But the idea that Rishi Sunak could call the election when he did, when no one was expecting it, come on, least of all the party, it would appear, who has been front and centre of the campaign, under whom reform has risen to nearly 20%, the idea that he had nothing to do with any of that is wrong. Well, yes, absolutely. But the idea that Kwasi Kwateng had nothing to do with any of that is equally wrong. And somebody who has caused so much damage to so many people should bow out gracefully from public life. As indeed, the people caught out in the Gambling Commission crisis, Laura and Craig, they should do the honourable thing and bow out now. They don't need to be sacked. They don't need to lose the whip. They don't need to be punished, excoriated. They just need to understand the honour that goes with the job that they're hoping to do. And they seem to fail in those stakes, as does Liz Truss. The demand for honour is in the name, it's in the title, the honourable member. I'm afraid most of the politicians that we see so often in the Conservative Party only seem to represent the second part of that title, member. And Kwasi Kwateng is a prime member.